All right, Chris, anything big happened with the Carolina Panthers this week since they last played on Sunday? Anything big? Anything interesting happen?
It's been kind of a quiet week, right? Like
Yeah.
just practice and oh, I'm sorry, there's a new interim head coach.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Because let's be real, I saw this coming. I think a lot of us saw this coming. We got a lot to react to. Let's get this sucker started.
The state of North Carolina covers 53,000 square miles. It is the habitat of the feared Carolina Panthers. Get dialed in, Panthers fans, for an in-depth look at your team, exclusive interviews, locker room insight. Let's huddle up for Panthers Playbook. Here are your hosts, Dennis Cox and Chris Lea.
Welcome back to another episode of Panthers Playbook. That's Chris Lea. I'm Dennis Cox. Let us know real quick. We're going to get into, obviously, David Tepper, the firing of Frank Reich, who might be the next head coach, the impact this has on Bryce Young, all that. But I want everyone to leave comments down below. Let us know your thoughts on who you want to be the next head coach of the Carolina Panthers. Let us know. Is it Ben Johnson, Detroit? Is it Bill Belichick? Because that name is legit floating around out there. And it's not just like, hey, let's just say Bill Belichick's name for the sake of it. It's actually legit being reported by like actual news outlets with sources that it might be a thing. We'll dive into that a little bit. But let us know your thoughts in the comments section down below. All right, Chris, before we get into all this mess with Frank Reich getting fired and all this, and there's plenty of blame to go on David Tepper, but we have to acknowledge one thing when it comes to Tepper. The dude is legit trying to win. You can't fault the guy for wanting to win. The guy wants to win. Now the execution of it, though, Chris, has been terrible, awful. But the guy does want to win. I will say
But
that.
who's not trying to win? You know what I'm saying?
They're actually, believe it or not, there are owners of professional sports teams that, you know what, the winning isn't a big deal as long as they're making money, because it's a business.
I got you, and that's understood, and that's I don't know any team in the NFL like that might be like a short term strategy for some NFL teams. There are some other teams, I won't name them, in other
Oh, you mean the
sports.
Pittsburgh Pirates? I'll say it. That's fine. The
Um,
Tampa Bay Rays. I'll say it. I don't care.
other sports that may not be actively trying to win. But like in football, everybody's actively trying to win. Like there's an incentive to win, and it's a competitive sport where everybody's trying to do that. And so like, yay, you're trying to win. Okay, all right, hand
I'm just
claps. But
saying.
are
Just
you
saying.
really trying to win if you are not letting the people who know football run your organization? You worry about the business side. Let them run the football side. And also the P word. David Tepper apparently says he has patience with other people. I in my other life, people I have extreme patience. Nobody ever leaves me.
No, you just fire them. That's different. There's a difference between the two.
Bruh.
Yeah,
Like,
so
bruh, come on.
the lack of patience is a legit thing. Now, with Matt Rule, when Rule was hired, he gave him 2+ years. Got into year
He
3.
was patient enough
He
with
was
him.
patient
He was
with that.
patient
You
enough.
know what? Wasn't working. 5 games into year 3, let him go. Complete opposite with this. He went complete opposite from what Matt Rule. Matt Rule, let's be real, no NFL coaching experience outside of like 1 year as in like a position assistant or something like that, long time ago. But the new staff that they brought in, you brought in a coach that's been an NFL lifer, previous head coaching experience, was a coordinator of a team, offensive coordinator of a team when they won a
That
Super
won the Super
Bowl.
Bowl. Yeah.
So now, granted, he wasn't the play caller, Doug Peterson was, but still, he was part of a staff that was part of a Super Bowl, all this other stuff. You brought in all this NFL experience, Jim Caldwell, NFL head coaching experience, Dom Capers, NFL head coaching experience, all these guys in, and it didn't work. And he blew it up after 11 games. So Frank Reich's gone. Josh McCown, the quarterback's coach, is gone. Deuce Staley, running back coach, is all gone. He just cleaned, I'm not saying a cleaned house, but we're starting back over again, just like we were at the end of last season, Chris.
part of me feels bad for Frank Reich because, like, yes, I thought he deserved to get fired, but also thought, and I said this before on the show, let him wait to the end of the season, like just for your quarterback's sake. Like, with the if Bryce Young really is your future, then for his sake, let him be there for a little bit, help him out with that development portion of it, give him those resources and those guys to kind of be around. But I didn't think Frank Reich was doing a good job, and it didn't seem like the place was improving at all during the season.
No, none of it
And we
was.
had
Nothing was.
questions about his coaching decisions and things like that. It's different if you're losing that many games. You lose 10 games, but you're constantly getting better. You just can't get that final win, and you're winning. You're playing within one possession. Like that was Matt Rule the first year. Won only 5 games, but man, 8 of those were within one possession.
Yeah.
And a few plays here or there, that team flips from 5-11 to maybe 13-3, right? It's completely different. That's not the case this year. So yes, Frank Reich got fired too early, but I didn't think he should have been here next year. But part of it too is just like this roster is bad.
Mhm.
Um, you need a little bit more. You made some really horrible decisions, Scott Fitterer, which is who I said needed to get canned first
Yeah, we'll get into that in a
before
bit.
before Frank Reich.
We'll get into that.
But there's so much wrong with this team that I feel bad that Frank Reich is being the one looked at as, all right, if we get him out of the building, maybe things will start getting better. No, everything, the bad part didn't start with Frank Reich. He's one of the bad pieces, but it
Mhm.
didn't start with him.
Oh yeah, I mean all the bad moves and stuff that have happened with this franchise since David Tepper bought it in 2018. Like that, none of that was Frank Reich's fault. None of it was the draft capital spent, the wasted picks, and all the trades and things like that. None of that was on Reich. He just happened to be the next domino that fell. Now you did mention Bryce Young. Before we get into Fitter, will say this. I think again, a lot of this is about the development of Bryce Young because Bryce Young, I don't think really has been developing. He hasn't really shown much growth during the course of the season. I think that's what necessitated a lot of this move. But I think this is actually going to help Bryce Young in the sense that because Deuce Staley's no longer there, because Josh McCown's not there, because Frank Reich's no longer there, big loud voices, right? You remove all that, you let Thomas Brown be the guy. Now, Jim Caldwell is the guy backing him up, but you let Thomas Brown be the guy, and there's a lot less noise around Bryce Young because he was hearing it from all these different voices, all these different people about what he needs to do this, do that, look for this, look for that. Sometimes that can be a lot of noise, and it can clutter your head. I think narrowing that focus and narrowing down the number of voices that are in his head or people trying to tell him stuff, I think is actually going to help Bryce Young. Now, I'm going to be on the opposite. I'm going to contradict myself here is that you went from Frank Reich play caller, Thomas Brown play caller, Frank Reich play caller, back to Thomas Brown play caller. That doesn't help a young quarterback. But I think the narrowing of voices in the offensive room, the old cliche of too many cooks in the kitchen, I think that's what we were looking at.
I believe so too. Let me go back to something that you said though. You said we haven't really seen him develop. He hasn't had a chance to develop.
Well, there's that,
And
yeah.
a lot of it is not necessarily, I mean, some of it may be the staff. We don't know what's going on in those meeting rooms and on the practice field and things like that. All I know is that what I saw in Spartanburg when I saw them practice against the Jets too, who have a pretty good defense. Now the Jets couldn't actually sack him, so
Mm.
that does add a little element to that as well. And it's not a full, like, you're going full speed. What I saw there, he looked good. He was arguably the best quarterback on the field when it was him, Andy Dalton, Aaron Rodgers, and Zach Wilson, right? They started really playing. He hasn't had a chance to really develop because he's running for his life
Mm-hmm.
and because his wide receivers aren't getting open. And I go back to this because I'll bring it back up every single time. He has been the most accurate quarterback in the tightest windows this season, right? So like I don't know. It's just you hear the national TV guys, you hear people say like, "What's wrong with Bryce Young?" or seeing people writing saying he's regressing, and it's kind of like, what does he have to work with at this point? Like
No, never.
he was never the super athlete. He was never going to wow you with his athleticism like a Cam Newton, like a Anthony Richardson, like maybe a Will Levis. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so like he's not going to have, people coming at him free will because the offensive line can't hold water and make all these dazzling plays. Now he looked pretty good, this past game, escaping and running around the pocket and things like that. And he's had flashes of that, but still he's never been like the most athletic dude. So what did we necessarily expect if he's not being protected and all that? So that, I think I have a problem when that stuff is said. But I go back to your main point. There probably were too many cooks in the kitchen.
Mhm.
You pull things back, and now you have Thomas Brown as the quarterbacks coach, and he's the running backs coach and the offensive coordinator. You have Jim Caldwell as the quarterbacks coach there, and also helping out with that. Like that is going to be a beautiful setup for Bryce Young for the last 6 games of the season. Listen to a few voices. Chris Tabor's not in it. He's special teams guy. So you have these 2 voices you get a chance to listen to. And Jim Caldwell worked with Peyton Manning. He's probably going to be sitting there working with Thomas Brown to make sure his career gets off the ground, because he's a novice at what he's doing as far as being an offensive coordinator and in the NFL. So we're excited to see what that ends up being for Bryce Young.
And I think as well, you mentioned Tabor, Chris Tabor, the special teams coordinator, being the head coach in the interim, is that allows Brown and Evero to focus on the respective sides of the ball. Hey, you guys continue to focus on that. Don't have to take on the burden of also being interim head coach while also doing those things. I think that's a good move in that regard. You mentioned about what Bryce has to work with, which, let's be real, it's not a whole lot. Well, who put this roster together? General manager, Scott Fitterer. I was shocked that I'm still shocked that we have not heard his name yet in terms of a press release of him being let go. I am shocked by that, because I figured he'd be gone at the same time. I figured he'd be gone at the same time.
At this point, I'm wondering, like, what does he have on David Tepper? Like, does he have like some type of scandalous secrets? Some freaking David Tepper, P. Diddy tape from a Charlotte high-rise party or something like that?
Oh,
What's going on? Like, why is he still with Job? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it's very interesting to see what all happens with that. But maybe he'll be going at the end of the year, but I think you definitely need to. I thought it was going to be smart to let him go. You can get a head start of getting a good GM inside of your building,
Mm-hmm.
and then letting that GM run the show, get you your next head coach. Because David Tepper, you obviously don't make great decisions with the NFL franchise and with your MLS franchise. Let's just put it out there.
Yeah, he goes through a lot of coaches, does David Tepper, because whomever the general manager is, not only are responsible for just rebuilding the roster, what in terms of signing free agents, but you have your own free agents and guys you have to worry about as well. Brian Burns is up for a contract. He's set to be a free agent at the end of the season, as is Frankie Louvu. Derek Brown's going into his 5th-year option coming up. What are you going to do in terms of contracts for some of these players? Who's going to make the decision on J.C. Horn if you pick up his 5th-year option? You have to make that decision this offseason. So whomever the general manager is has some big decisions. Now, are you going to hire a general manager first before you bring a head coach, or are you going to bring a head coach in before you hire a general manager? I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know how David Tepper is going to select that, but I have a couple names in mind that pop up in my head, Chris, when it comes to the next head coach. The one I'm thinking of that apparently David Tepper and a lot of teams pursued last offseason, Ben Johnson, the Detroit Lions head coach. Offensive coordinator. And I have a couple reasons. One, he's been part of that rebuild under Dan Campbell. So he knows what the patient, slow processes work like. And you know what? It's amazing what happens with Jared Goff's career when he's actually had good coaching around him. When he got Sean McVay as his head coach and then working with Ben Johnson, kind of jump-started his career after being the number 1 overall pick. Also, he was born in 1986 and happened to go to college in the state of North Carolina, grew up in the state of North Carolina, Chris. He was born May of 86. You were born April of 86. I was born June of 86. This guy's perfect for the job. He's a North Carolinian.
It's
Let's
a
be
Lee
real. This is
Johnson
perfect.
Cox sandwich.
Bingo. Just saying.
Lee Johnson Cox sandwich.
See, there it is. Pause. That's all I'm going to say. That. But Ben Johnson, seriously, I think he's a young up-and-coming coach. That's a lot of teams wanted him last season. He turned everyone down to stick with the Lions this season. I think Ben Johnson, back up the Brinks truck. He's going to have options this upcoming offseason. Just park the Brinks truck in his driveway and leave him the key. Like, this is yours.
I just hope that he gets, if he wants to come, first of all, I hope that he gets time and the patience of David Tepper. And I hope David Tepper kind of keeps his nose out of the whole thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I think you need to get a GM first that can run the whole thing and say, hey, I would love to get Ben Johnson and bring him in, and then I'll stand back. After that, it's y'all show. He definitely has the offense there in Detroit looking really good. And he's shown promise when it comes down to coaching and all that, so he could be the guy. The main thing for me is I just want to make sure that outside of the head coach, this roster gets fixed.
Oh yeah,
like that's the main thing. Like outside of that, we're going to be in the same circle we've been in if this roster doesn't get fixed, and that's not on the head coach. That's going to be on the GM. Because if Ben Johnson comes in and Scott Fitterer is still his GM, well, he's still going to have a bad roster, and he's still going to have David Tepper, who's impatient as an owner, and he might be out of here in 2 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's just going to be that circle of life in Charlotte that we're seeing, and I don't want to see that again.
I don't want to see that either. I don't. And I bring up Detroit, which is really weird to bring up Detroit as like a model of what the Carolina Panthers should do. It's really crazy. Because
Right.
when they hired Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell's in year 3 right now. They have I think 8-3 going into this upcoming weekend. I think they're 8 wins so far in the year.
Something like that, yeah.
But here's the thing. They hired Dan Campbell, never was a coordinator, but a guy who played in the NFL and was a position coach and was cultivated, as a position coach. I mean, he coached with Sean Payton in New Orleans and even spent time as an interim head coach of the Miami Dolphins a long time ago as well for a hot second. And they easily could have said in the middle of year 2 when they were like, 1-6 or something like that, middle of last year, people were like, well, this Dan Campbell guy ain't working out, but they stuck with him. We saw Detroit really flip things around late last season, almost got into the playoffs, and we're seeing what they're doing now because they stuck with it. They built a bunch of young, good players through the draft. They got a lot of draft capital and built that up, and here they are in year 3 of that turnaround, and they're one of the best teams in the NFL. It's amazing how that worked because there was stability and there was patience. It's still mind-boggling to me. I think the Carolina Panthers should look at the Detroit Lions as a model for what they should do over the next 3 years. But right now, it's working for them.
Well, here's the thing that the
and
Detroit
Campbell brought
Lions
culture,
found
by
out.
the way, too, which is important.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Mhm.
true. Here's the thing that the Detroit Lions found out, right? Get some guys that have North Carolina ties. You know what I'm saying? Brad
Yeah.
Holmes, their general manager, went to North Carolina A&T State University, Aggie Pride, by the way. And he's doing a marvelous job. Oh, how did they get that draft capital? Because of their good GM, right? And then you have Ben Johnson, who, of course, went to UNC, went to AC Reynolds High School over there in Asheville. You know what I'm saying? Like, get some North Carolina infusion in it. Now, I know Frank Reich lives in North Carolina, but he didn't spend his formative years in North Carolina. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't like become a man in North Carolina. Get somebody who became a man in North Carolina, like Steve Wilkes. I'm out.
I mean,
I just had to put that in there.
there's that.
Put that in there.
There's that. But hey, maybe if you want to go the route of Detroit, Ray Agnew, who's the assistant general manager in Detroit, also spent 4 years as director of pro scouting with the LA Rams, helping put together a championship team out over there. Maybe you bring him because they have a relationship with Johnson. Maybe that's the route you go. I don't know. Or like you said, just call San Francisco, be like, hey, Steve there. Can we talk to Steve?
Hey, can we talk to Steve? Steve there? Please, baby, please. Please, man, I'm sorry. She wasn't as fine as you. I'm sorry. I don't know what I was. It was just makeup, and the makeup came off, and she's ugly as. I'm sorry, man. I thought she was real. I found out everything is fake. I'm so sorry. You were worth it all. I'm sorry, baby. Please come back. I need you.
All
That's
right,
what
well,
David Tepper needs to be doing.
we're gonna end on that. We're ending on that. Subscribe, smash the subscribe button. We'll see you on Sunday, 4:00 kick. We'll see you on Sunday after the Panthers lose to the Bucks.
I don't know. They might win now because they you talk about what Steve Wilkes was able to do. I don't know. Maybe we'll see.
Hey, piss off all the Chicago fans. We'll see you guys on Sunday.